Hi and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about everything that I've learned about burnout, an increasingly common word that I hear from my patients and also my colleagues. Here's the thing, many of us have stress in our lives, and this can be from a number of different sources. The best way to approach the issue of burnout is in identifying this. So these are the topics that I'm talking about today, and you can skip ahead if you'd like. Think of these steps as a list of different options that you can make use of. This is not a 10-step program that you need to follow that will magically lead you to a better place. And this is not some astounding equation that you can just insert into your day. Rather, these are practical tips that you may be able to incorporate into your life and help wrench you out of your stressful position. Think of this as a recipe book, where you can pick and choose the advice that you think would work for you. If I was speaking to you as a patient, I would try to personalize this to you rather than giving a one-size-fits-all approach. But of course that's not quite possible for this format. So what is burnout? Well, it's a state of emotional, physical and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. It occurs when you feel overwhelmed, emotionally drained, and unable to meet constant demands. Now, in my experience, burnout in itself is not actually a new medical condition. It's not something that's just turned up in the 21st century and ruined all our lives, like COVID. Rather, it's our generation's phrase of choice for describing a set of symptoms that many others before might have referred to as a breakdown. And that's why at the start of the video I said it's a word that I'm hearing more often. So the symptoms are much the same as I'm used to. This is the first and often the most important step. It's probably what has led you to this video in the first place. And what I mean by this is that it's really important for you to recognize when things are getting too much. And that can come in different forms, whether you're struggling to keep up with the pace at work, if you're finishing later and later each day and feeling exhausted before the next day even starts, if your sleep pattern is so messed up that you can't sleep because your mind is always on your work, or if you're getting the physical symptoms such as a headache because of the stress that you're under. It might also be external things that others have picked up on, that you're more snappy or irritable than usual, that you're losing your cool, that you're not paying attention to your family or friends because your mind is always on your work. Recognizing this early on is crucial to allow you to then make the changes you need to stop this from progressing any further, until you're literally at the point of not being able to take any more, the point of burnout. So take a minute to think about what those signs and symptoms are for you. Maybe write them down if that's what helps you, or maybe ask a close friend or a partner what they think about how you act when you're stressed. Once you know the signs to look out for, it'll make it easier to stop things from progressing, if this ever happens in future. This leads me on to my next point, reaching out and asking for help. If you are truly struggling and you're getting those early signs of burnout, feeling stressed or anxious, tell someone. Whether it's a friend, your partner, your work colleague, or boss, tell someone so that you can ask for help. Don't be shy to share this and don't feel bad about asking for help. Everyone can get to the point where it's just too much, and it's absolutely okay to ask for help. We sometimes get wrapped in guilt in not being able to manage everything, but this is exactly what ends up leading to burnout. So don't fall in that trap. Don't get to the stage that you're juggling so many things that it's not possible to keep them all up. Ask for help. Another question that I'm often asked about burnout is whether this is the same as having depression or anxiety. Now the short answer is not quite, but many of the symptoms that people do experience overlap, and it's certainly possible for you to have depression or anxiety alongside burnout. So the next question is, how do we define anxiety and depression, and how do they differ from burnout? Now for those conditions, we don't have a specific test to diagnose them, of course, but they are clinical diagnoses based on the symptoms that you do have. And we can also use specific frameworks or questionnaires that help us to classify these symptoms. The most common of these are the PHQ-9 for depression and the GAD-7 for anxiety. And these are some of the questions that are included in these frameworks. But here's the big difference with burnout. You see, it's not technically classified as a medical condition. Rather, it's a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. Now, that's according to the ICD-11. So you could argue that it's not necessary to use some kind of questionnaire to diagnose it, as it's not quite something that needs to be diagnosed as such. There are different ways of looking at this, of course, but I actually think this is a good thing. Now, there can sometimes be a tendency to over-medicalize conditions, and I don't think that that's always a good thing. Suffering extreme stress leading to burnout does not have to lead to anxiety and depression. It can, but it doesn't necessarily lead to those conditions. Now, the reason I'm making this distinction is to be clear that while burnout is common and affects many people, it is something that occurs in an occupational context rather than affecting all aspects of your life, which is what usually occurs with anxiety and depression. Another way to look at the phenomenon of burnout is to try to shed a positive light on it. This is, in a sense, a defense mechanism. It's a way of recognizing a negative environment and telling you that this is too much, this is not healthy for you. And hopefully that will lead you to finding a path out of it. All of this is to say that hopefully there are ways of managing this occupational stress that you can do, and which I'm going to talk about now. And hopefully that will prevent you from developing those symptoms of depression or anxiety. But of course, if the stress you experience is more than just an occupational issue, and if it's leading you to develop symptoms of anxiety or depression, then you certainly do need medical support. And I would recommend speaking to either your GP or a family doctor about this. So, now that we've talked about what exactly burnout is, let's talk about how we can manage this. This is in part from my own experience of what has helped me, but also in speaking to patients and figuring out what has helped them. So let's get into it. Taking action. So when you recognize the stress building up, you can then be proactive. A large part of that is simply saying no. Saying no to new projects that are put in your path, saying no to the next meeting, and saying no to the next demand that is piled on you. Now, to be clear, I'm not simply telling you to say no without context. Communication is critical, especially if you work in a team. You want to explain why you're saying no, so that your colleagues and friends can empathize with you and understand where you're coming from, rather than thinking that you're just being lazy. So what I'm saying is to say no and explain your reasons why. Explain that you've got a lot on your plate right now, that you're the kind of person that wants to give your project your full attention, and you can't justify adding in something new which would negatively affect your performance in that first project. Say no to the next meeting because you're busy working on something else, and you're in your flow and you don't want to disturb that. Say no to the next demand because you're swamped right now and you can't possibly handle any more. Gauge how much you're willing to share with your audience. You might not want to let on to your work colleague that you're struggling, but if you do, know that that's okay. Don't feel shy about setting your own boundaries and managing other people's expectations of you. A simple way of putting this is to under-promise and over-deliver. Don't force yourself to take on too much, and that would lead to burnout. Make it clear how much work you can handle and put the onus on them to work around this. The next important action to take is delegation. And this can be a real change for some of you who are not used to that because you're so used to getting things done yourself. Now the key here is changing your attitude from, if you want something right, do it yourself, to, I don't have the time to micromanage every detail in this job or this situation, so I'm going to share out the bits that don't need my level of knowledge or experience. Now if you're very hands-on and tend to micromanage, this is critical for you. This shift won't happen overnight, and it's more of an attitude change than anything else. Become comfortable with delegating tasks to others, and if needed, if they don't do a good enough job, then help them to improve for next time. Train them up to get to your level. A lot of people falsely believe that they're the only person that can do a particular job or task, and that is very, very rarely the case. It is far more time efficient for you to train up your colleagues to do these tasks to a better level than for you to get involved in every minute detail. On the flip side of this is when people delegate too much. Now, if you're the kind of person who is used to delegating, this is more for you. Recognize that delegation is not shirking away from jobs that are put on you without a second thought. You should choose wisely what to delegate and not in a scattergun approach. Pick the right person to delegate to based on their skill set, based on their availability, based on their experience. Don't just delegate randomly, because that will lead to resentment among your team and possibly a feeling that you don't appreciate the importance of their time. The next step is a simple one, the concept of chunking. Essentially, you want to aim to dedicate certain parts of your day or week to a specific task. The idea that you give this specific task all of your focus at that time and then leave it be. The reason that this can be beneficial is that it can be very unproductive and even stressful to constantly jump from one task to another and then another. Focus your mind on one particular task at a time. A good example of this is checking and replying to emails. If you're the kind of person who gets dozens of emails a day and struggles to dip in and out of them because it sidetracks you from whatever you're working on, try this chunking approach instead. Say to yourself that you will only answer emails from, let's say, between 9 to 9:30 a.m. or maybe in the afternoon, 3 to 3:30 p.m. And don't get dragged into answering them at any other times of the day, unless they're urgent, of course. Now, this approach may not work for everyone, specifically if you have a particular role where you need to be approachable at all times. But if you're not sure, just ask yourself, can this wait a few hours? Is it imperative that I reply right this minute? A quick check with yourself could save you precious time, save you from distracting you from whatever you are working on. The more you practice this approach, the more people will start to recognize that this is how you work. And hopefully they'll begin to work around this and come to an understanding that while you are reachable, you will not necessarily reply immediately and at any time of the day. Going forward, this is the kind of thing that will help you manage your time more effectively and other people's expectations of your time. It sends a clear message that your time is precious and you'll do things when you have allocated the specific time to it. You could use the same process not just for emails, but for other things as well. If you're a writer, set yourself a specific chunk of time during the day when you do this with no distractions. If you have any particular task that you tend to do repeatedly on a daily or weekly basis, find a way to chunk this time together to allow you to focus on this and turn it into a habit. Right, so now we get into the fun bit. Relaxation is an important part of the journey out of burnout. The purpose of this is to take your mind out of work, to de-stress, disengage from the workplace. And when I say this, I mean to take this seriously. Don't feel guilty for this time, and don't let your mind wander back to work. This may be easier for some of you than others. If you think that you might find this challenging, here are some steps that you may find useful. Perspective is important for this one, and if you feel like you can't relax, you must give yourself permission to do so. Allow yourself this chance at a break. Think of it as a prescription for your relaxation, a form of treatment, or even a prevention for burnout. We all have different ways of relaxing, whether that's spending time with your family, friends, or even just some me time. Do things that you enjoy, not things that you feel obliged to do. If that means watching Netflix or reading a book or playing games, that's absolutely fine. And maybe that means giving yourself the chance to sleep in rather than waking up early. Or maybe doing some meditation. Go for a walk, experience nature. Exercise, of course, can be really powerful, even if it's not something that you do regularly. There's plenty of evidence showing that it can reduce your stress and improve your mood, alongside the obvious other health benefits. If you're on holiday, make sure that you disengage from work altogether. And that might mean not reading your emails or not logging in to check in, no matter what. We can often be slaves to our phones as well, so find ways to actively disengage from it. You could turn on the Do Not Disturb mode, or maybe turn off all notifications altogether. Maybe just turn off emails and Slack. You can even change your screen from color to monochrome, and you'd be surprised at how off-putting this is. It can be a really good way of discouraging you from picking up your phone all the time. The thing to bear in mind here is that Purely taking this step without addressing the underlying issues is only a temporary fix that may buy you some time, but it won't change the source of the stress itself and the difficult work environment. So by all means, make sure you take the time to unwind, but don't fool yourself into thinking that this is the only way to resolve burnout, because unfortunately, it won't. It's only a sticking plaster, while the real stress at work will be there when you return. Introspection. So the final bit of advice is possibly the biggest. If your current job has led you to questioning whether you actually do have burnout, then maybe it's time to ask yourself why you're doing this particular job. If you're working hard 5, 6, 7 days of the week, with long hours and dreading every day and hating it, ask yourself why you're doing this. Is it because you have to work to put food on the table? Or is it something else? Is it because you don't want to be perceived to look lazy, or maybe you're trying to impress other people with how hard you work? Or is it because of how much money you make? Seriously ask yourself that and figure out what works for you. And if you hate your job and you earn more than you actually need, ask yourself if you should stop doing it. If you don't enjoy your job, maybe it's because it doesn't work for you. And in this day and age, you can do whatever you want, and you can be whoever you want. If you're 30 or 40 or even 50 years old and feel like you don't like what you're doing, it's not too late to consider a change. You're only halfway through your life realistically. If your attitude is that you can't wait to finish work each day and just relax, or you can't wait for the day you can retire so you can just stop this relentless work, then maybe you have to get out of this job. Too often we get tied down or tied into things that we don't want to do. We coast along because this is what we've done so far, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we must keep doing so. And that's okay. Life is a learning process. You can't possibly have had everything figured out by the time you decided to start your first job in finance or as a doctor or whatever it is. It's okay to get it wrong, but don't keep making the same mistake and keep staying unhappy with your job and your life. If this road doesn't work for you, change direction. Who cares what anyone else thinks? If your job is limiting your true potential and your true happiness, then maybe you need to let go of your inhibitions so that you can excel, so that you can exceed. Some people are very talented at a lot of things. Some people can run, sing, dance, science, anything. But most of us are very good at few things and excel at one or two things. So sit down and think about what you truly excel in and what you also love. And that might be something nebulous and non-specific. But here's the thing. In this world, you can do and be whatever you want. Imagine you had a job that you absolutely loved. One where you can't wait for Monday, not dread it. That's the goal. Not finding a way to retire early. People have it the wrong way around. I myself had this the wrong way around. And that's okay. That's absolutely fine. Don't waste time judging yourself. Instead, act on it. You have the rest of your life to figure this out and find out what you truly love and enjoy. So start looking right now. Ask people what they do for a living. Ask them how they got into it. Ask them what they love and what they hate. You can literally ask anyone. The internet is your oyster. No one in the history of the world has had the networking capabilities of this generation. Get on LinkedIn, search your network or your network's network. As soon as you see a job or a company that remotely interests you, message that person. Most people would be more than willing to help. And if they don't, that's fine. Ask someone else. Ask one of the other billion users that are online right now. And keep asking. Keep searching until you find the job that you think you might like. Then do it. And don't doubt yourself. Just do it. And if you don't find a job you like, then make the job. Carve out your niche in the world and make your passion into a job. This is literally the first time in history that you can sit in your own home and launch any manner of business and apply to hundreds or even thousands of jobs. So that's my experience of burnout and some steps that you can take right now. I recognize that none of these are going to be easy if you're not used to them. But if you think you're suffering from burnout or you're on your way there, think about which of these may be feasible for you and find a way to incorporate this into your life. I hope you found this video useful, and I'd love to know your experiences. And if you found this video useful, Make sure you comment below, or feel free to contact me on Instagram. Oh, and remember to hit like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And I guess I'll see you next time. See ya.